Hi, and welcome to this lesson about the GRE exam. My name is Sid, and I work as a GRE, GMAT, and SAT faculty with Gyan Foundation classes in Mumbai. I have myself gone through this process at some point in time, and I know how stressful this can get. Hence, I have tried to make things as simple as possible because of my experience as a teacher and as a student as well. If you know of a simpler way we could handle a particular topic, I would be more than glad to hear from you about it. My contact details would be provided towards the end of this video. Let us first handle the question, who should take the GRE? Well, the answer is almost anyone wanting to go to a good grad school for either a master's or a PhD program might have to take the GRE. Whether you are a biotechnology student or a marketing student, the chances are that you might have to take the GRE. It is, however, helpful if you look at the program website before you start to study for the GRE exam. Now, I say this because many of the MBA schools, the B schools, where even an MS program in management or in marketing or in human resources, or the PhD programs in management, decision sciences, and some of the other PhD programs within the B school would require you to take the GMAT at times. This trend is changing of late, where some schools, a handful of schools, are accepting the GRE in lieu of the GMAT exam. Nevertheless, it would be in your interest to go ahead and check the program website, and under the admission requirements tab, you'll find what they need, which standardized tests they need you to take. So that the same rule applies to law schools as well. Law schools, of course, do not take anything except the LSAT. You would have to positively, if you are wanting to attend law school in the United States, then you would have to take the LSAT. Now, as I said, it would be great if you can go ahead and look up the school's admission requirements, especially the schools that you intend to apply after your GRE or GMAT exams. It's in your interest to go up to those schools' websites and check what's the exam they require. Now, about the GRE exam, we are not going to talk extensively about the sections and about what comes under the quant, what kind of questions should we expect. There'll be a different video on that. But here I'm going to talk about the sections at large. Under the sections, what could you expect? What are the question types? And what are the three sections on the GRE? So let's start about talking it. But before we even go there, let us see how you register for the exam. You register for the exam at ets.org/GRE. You go up there, create an account, answer a set of questions, and then they would allow you to take the dates. It's a pretty straightforward process. Just go through to this website and create an account, and pretty much everything else is self-explanatory. Now, these exams are conducted mostly at prometric centers across the world, and at times at non-prometric centers. If you are from India, you would know what a non-prometric center is. Now, a lot of students come up to me and ask whether it's advisable to go to a prometric versus, or a non-prometric center. My answer is simple. I would, if I were a student, if I were in your shoes, I would go into the prometric center for a simple reason that they have been around for a very long time, and in case there is a problem during the exam or before the exam or after the exam, they would be better people to, handle that problem, because for the simple reason that they have been in the market, or they have been doing the same thing for a very long time. If you have no other option, and if there is only a non-prometric center, if dates are only available at a non-prometric center, please go ahead and take it, and you will not face any problems. I'm sure about that. A lot of students come up to me and ask this question also. They ask me, what is the ideal study time? This varies from student to student. My answer is that it can vary anywhere from 8 weeks to, in some cases I've seen 16 to 20 weeks. Why does this vary so much? Well, if you are a student who hasn't been in touch with mathematics, or if you are a student who is not into reading, if you are a student who doesn't have, who hasn't learned words too well, or whose main medium of education hasn't been English, you're going to face problems studying towards your GRE. So in this case, ideally, we are looking at a 4 to 5 month time frame. So where you build your vocabulary slowly, you do your math problems regularly, and you do your reading comprehensions regularly. And this process is going to take time if you're one of them. But if you're a student who has been in touch with math, who's good at reading, who has been using flowery languages to write letters, to write emails, if you know your language pretty well, then I'm thinking your time frame would be 8 to 10 weeks. And that should be more than enough, even if you're a working professional trying to give the GRE. What is the ideal time to take the GRE exam date? This again varies from person to person, but one standard rule that everybody needs to apply is you should take the GRE only after you have the passport in your hand, your country's passport. If you are not a US resident or a US citizen or a person staying within the United States, the chances are high that you would be requiring a passport to give this exam. And in many of the developing countries around the world, getting a passport takes 2 to 3 months, sometimes more. So you don't want to be in that position where you have taken the date, but the passport hasn't come. I have had students who have gone through that stress, and that should be least of your problems while studying for your GRE. So apply for your passport. The day you get your passport in your hand, that's an ideal day to take your GRE date. The other milestone or the check for you should be, you should ideally you should study for a month and a half, maybe 5 to 6 weeks, and try and give one of the practice tests. Now, a good student, if you are a person who is in the top 10 percentile of your class, and if you're already crossing a 310, 315 kind of a score, then that's a good time to go ahead and take your GRE. If you're in the 60th percentile, 70th percentile, you're getting around 300, that's a decent place to go ahead and take your GRE. Either ways, around the 8th week is the max you should wait. You should go ahead and take your GRE dates after 8 weeks of preparation. And depending on your score, you should be logical enough to see how far away you should take your date. So if you have already finished one iteration of all the content you have and things like that, then you should go ahead and take your GRE dates within a month and a half or so. So this varies from person to person again. Now, the fees for GRE as of the day this video is being made is US dollar and $195. And it will change from country to country depending on what the exchange rate is. The next part is specifics about the GRE exam. The GRE exam is approximately 4 hours long with 6 sections on it. We'll talk about each of these sections in detail in the next window. Also, one of the most important aspects of GRE is its adaptive nature. which means the GRE literally chooses the next section based on your performance in the previous one. If you do well on a section, the next section would be tougher. And if you do a section badly, the next section would be comparatively easier. This said, I would suggest students not to focus on areas that are beyond their control, and also not to think about what is easy and what is tough during the exam, as this is a comparative term. For example, someone like me, probability might be easy to understand, and hence even a tough question on probability would be easy for me to solve. At the same time, even a medium level sum on conics might take more time for me to solve. Hence, I always suggest that instead of spending time on thinking about things beyond your control, it is always easier to focus on every question and treat it by its merit. If you think it's hard, try for less than 15-20 seconds. If it's really beyond your reach, skip and move on to the next question, and come back to this question once you have finished all the others. Now, one additional thing that the GRE offers you is it allows you to skip within particular sections, which means, as I just said, you can use it to your advantage and get done with all the questions, all the other questions that you know, and come back to the sums that you have missed or you have skipped. So the new GRE also, I wanted to let you know, provides you with an electronic screen calculator. Beware though, this also acts like a trap, which means if you get used to using a calculator even for small multiplications or division, this screen calculator might be a little cumbersome. There is no backspace in case you need to erase the numbers. You need to start entering from the first number. So this is one way of wasting your time in case you need it for the most basic calculations. But it is a great tool to use if there are complex calculations. It will be very helpful to save some time out there.
GRE is made up of quant, verbal and writing. Through these three areas, GRE tests your ability to solve problems and to think critically. It also tests some things that you may have learned over a period of time. For example, vocabulary. While it is true that you build vocabulary over a period of time, in my experience as a teacher, I have seen some students learn enough words to get through the GRE exam in their 3 to 4 month study period. But this requires you to do things daily and diligently. Same is the case with mathematics. While many of you might believe that you have forgotten every concept ever taught to you, you will be surprised as to how quickly you get a hang of things once we cover a few topics here. Anyways, let us first look at what the GRE exam holds for you. The first section on the GRE is always the analytical writing assessment, or the AWA section. And the first question that you ever encounter on the GRE will always be the issue, and the second question would be the argument essay. Now, you would have to attempt the issue and the argument, and each of these are given 30 minutes before you get on to the quant and the verbal section. The quant section has problem solving and quant comparison. And I'm not going to go into details in this video about what problem solving is and how the sum looks versus what quant comparison is. That part is done in one of our other videos, which talks about the quant section more in detail. And then there is the verbal section, of course, which has reading comprehension, text completion, and sentence equivalence. Again, a detailed video about the verbal section, how the questions look, what is required, is all done up in one of the other videos, and I would encourage you to go ahead and watch that video after you finish this one. Now, one thing that I do want to reiterate here is, in order to do well on reading, text completion, reading comprehension, text completion, and text sentence equivalence, you would need to know words very well. So your vocabulary building exercise starts on day one. The day you make a decision to take your GRE, your vocabulary building exercise starts. And this ends on whatever day you decide to give your GRE, and you are satisfied with the score that you get. Finally, let's talk about the experimental section. After you finish the AWA section,
you will see
the quant and the verbal sections in the following pattern. The green boxes, to be precise. It could be in the quant verbal pattern, or the verbal quant pattern. Now what follows that is the fifth section after the AWA, which could be either a verbal or a quant. What is basically this experimental section? This experimental section is a verbal or a quant section which is not counted towards the final score. Now, if it is a verbal quant, verbal pattern, then one of the verbal sections is experimental. We do not know which one. It could be the first verbal that you see after AWA, or the third section after the AWA, or the fifth section after the AWA. Similarly, if it's a quant, verbal quant pattern, then one of the quant sections is experimental. So we just do not know which one is precisely the experimental section. GRE will score you based on 2 verbal and 2 quant sections. And this goes without saying, because one of the sections is an experimental one. And, one suggestion that I would always give I have always given to every student who has come to me is, do not think about which section is a experimental section, or which section seems easier, which section seems harder. These are, again, beyond your control. So you would rather focus on all the sections with equal seriousness and concentration, so that your ultimate score would be a very, very nice and acceptable score.